Today, I want to talk about having a backup plan. We call that having a plan B because sometimes failure just ain't your fault. Because we are entrepreneurs, we know how to pivot when something doesn't go our way. But failure is a very strong word.
Failure can come from all kinds of sources. It can come from stupid mistakes that we make as entrepreneurs, but oftentimes failure comes in a form that you didn't anticipate.
Welcome back to our channel. We're here to help you bounce back to success. Today, I want to talk about having a backup plan. We call that having a plan B because sometimes failure just ain't your fault. Talk about that more in a moment. Hi, Max. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Tony. Good to be with you again.
I love this series. We're getting some good feedback, so we're going to keep on keeping on. And as I just mentioned, as entrepreneurs, we all hate the word failure, but it seems that some of us, at least, we're so used to it. It's like water on a duck's back. Well, kind of. Because we are entrepreneurs, we know how to pivot when something doesn't go our way. But failure is a very strong word. Now, when I was reading your book, in your chapter, The Greatest Gift from God, you talk about how failure just ain't your fault. I've never heard that one before. That's kind of refreshing. So I'd like to ask you, what can we learn from that and about that and maybe even having a backup plan?
Yeah, failure can come from all kinds of sources. It can come from stupid mistakes that we make as entrepreneurs, but oftentimes failure comes in a form that you didn't anticipate. And I can name a bunch of failures that I didn't anticipate. And even if I had anticipated, there was not anything I could do about them until the event occurred. The first failure I think that I recognized as a young man was my dad's failure. He Early on, there was a program put out by the government to farmers. It was called the Soil Bank. And it said, if you won't farm, just put your farm in the soil bank. We'll pay you as much as you would have made, probably, but don't farm. Well, now that sounds like a pretty good deal, doesn't it? You don't have to worry about boll weevils and cotton crop failures and floods and all that sort of stuff. So Dad did that. It was a 10-year program. And what he did, he took the money that they gave him. That's what he lived on. But he decided he probably should have a plan B. And so he went to our little town and became the city's utility manager. It was a great job until politics changed. And suddenly that was a appointed job, political job, and he was out. His plan C, okay, was that he became a utility truck driver. And he did that for as long as he could, and a tough job, but he always had income and he always had money in the bank. And when the 10 years were up, he couldn't farm anymore because prices were up, the equipment that we had on the farm. So he had a plan B and a plan C, and it worked really well for my dad. Okay, so what about Max? Did Max ever have to have a plan B? Well, I had to have a bunch of them, but one of them that I think probably will get a chuckle. Wayne Newton, the famous entertainer, got into the Arabian horse business. And he had tons of horses, millions of dollars invested in Arabian horses. And this was at a time when they were really popular, and the races were popular, and the shows were popular. And there was a big event in Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, a friend of mine had a couple of horses, and he came to me and he said, Max, you've made a little money. You should probably get into the Arabian horse investments. So I looked at it and said, geez, that looks like a lot of fun. I used to ride horses a lot, and even an Arabian. And so I bought an interest in a national champion. Well, there's an old saying that we should be careful of, Tony. If one is good, seven's probably better, right? No, that's not true. And I can prove it. So I bought not only interest in a horse, I thought, well, I want one of my own. So I bought an up and coming horse, and then I bought another one. And suddenly I was into this thing pretty deep and having fun. I had a filly that went undefeated one year on the Arabian show. So anyway, this was great. Guess what? Happened to Wayne Newton, happened to me. One day, Congress changed the tax laws, and you could not take uh, tax deduction on future needs. For example, I bought horse feed in December that I needed in January. IRS did a little audit and said, nope, you can't do that. So suddenly, not only could I not make these deductions and therefore make a little more money in the horse business, but the price of horses dropped tremendously. $2 million horses were selling for $100,000.
Oh,
Oh my goodness. So that wasn't my fault that the government decided to change the tax laws. By the way, the audit was completed after 10 months, ended up owing them $50. But think what it cost me for the audit. So the point is, what was my plan B? Plan B was to sell the horses and get out of there, which I did, and with a plan because I had reserved funds in that particular pocket, the horse feeding pocket, for future use. And so I had plan B. I went from that plan B, and this is another exciting one. Remax, the real estate company, was just getting started, and boy, it was popping everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And so a friend and I decided that we would buy a Remax franchise. Now, I had been in the real estate business. I had been in the real estate brokerage business, residential brokerage, commercial brokerage. So I knew something about what I was going to do. But I bought not one territory, I bought 7 territories. I had the franchise from San Francisco to Sacramento, up through the wine country, and I got busy. I bought equipment, I leased buildings, I handled new, and it was going great. And then there was a thing called the recession.
mhm.
And it was, Tony, it was, what if I gave a party and nobody came? I was so upside down, it was unbelievable. So I thought I was going to file bankruptcy. What was my plan B? Bankruptcy? Well, I didn't file bankruptcy. I'd never filed bankruptcy, but I convinced my accountant that we ought to talk to an attorney. This is a great story. So the attorney listened to everything. He said, I don't think you're going to have to file, but if you want to prepare to file, I'll go ahead and get ready. And I had my accountant with me. And the accountant says, I don't think you're going to have to file. And the attorney says, I tell you what, here's the deal. I'll start the paperwork. I need a retainer of $5,000. $5,000. If I had $5,000, I wouldn't be talking to you about bankruptcy. I mean, that's how low it was. So my friend, the accountant, when we left, this is a great, I think, lesson. Plan Bs. My attorney said, here's what I want you to think of, Max. Think of yourself down on your hands and knees, and there's a peanut on the floor in front of you. And I want you to push that peanut with your nose. Just keep crawling across the floor, pushing that peanut. Every once in a while, look around and see the progress that you've made. Then get back down and just keep pushing that peanut until you get to the other side of the wall. I think you'll be okay. Well, I had in my mind, I had holes in my pants at the knees. I had a bloody nose. But you know what? I just kept pushing that peanut, looking for plan B or plan C. And it worked out really well. Great lesson. You got to have grit when you need something to happen to change what has gone wrong, not your fault. Just keep pushing that peanut across the floor. Every once in a while, look around and see if you've made some progress.
That's a very good lesson, and it reminds me of so many things in my entrepreneurial journey. In
Yeah.
fact, what got me to podcasting, I don't think I've mentioned it on this channel. Uh, had a lead generation social a marketing business,
Uh-huh.
and I had multiple clients. Uh, and one day I go into the office on a Monday, and one of my clients, I'm doing $1 million a year in sales, just
Right.
as one client as an example, and they canceled. Now, I never expected it. That's the whole thing. And that's why you need a plan B is I never expected it. I've got multiple clients. I'm growing. Things are looking good. We're doing a lot of marketing. They canceled. It's like, why? What happened? Well, another federal regulation came. This is the fourth time in 7 years, a ruling, a protocol, or now we need to do this that changed the whole face of marketing. The client could no longer accept the marketing services the way we were doing it. We had to retool. They had to retool. All my clients, like a domino, had to retool. And it was like, poof, just like that. And which, the world saw that a couple of years ago 2021, 22, etc. Things happen that is not or are not under our control. And you always, even when it looks great and just, the feeding frenzy, the money's coming in, you're doing good, you gotta always have something. What if something else goes wrong? Which is really hard because you're kind of, in a way, Max, counter intending yourself, counter creating. If things are going great, why would you be so negative and figure out and plan what if things go bad? So there's kind of a fine tune on that. I didn't have a plan. I went into podcasting, which I've used all my resources to build that up nicely. But I want to ask you about, because as I was just mentioning, it's like you don't want to be your own jinx and say, well, what if everything just disappears? So how do we get through that? Should we write out a plan? Should we have this backup if all else fails and just kind of forget about it and put it in a computer file somewhere? Or how
Yeah.
serious should we get about having a plan B?
Well, I think number one, your plan B should be, what if this ends suddenly? Okay. I mean, you got to first decide that it could happen. All right. Because it does. I was in a company that was selling nutritional supplements, and a basketball player in Florida collapsed on the basketball floor with a heart condition. And there was an ingredient in one of the nutritional supplements that they thought might have caused this. And suddenly, that whole nutritional company, not just that product, stopped. It was over. And I was making tens of thousands a month. What do? You got any money in the bank? You better have. You need a reserve. You really need a reserve. So that's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is you examine, can I move into a similar industry, into a similar condition with the same type of products? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. What happened to me when products that I was selling in my retail business no longer were available? I had other products in case those went out. I had learned that. Next, you better have a good attorney and a good accountant that you can go to and say, what have we got planned? What do we have on hold? What are we going to do about paying the taxes, et cetera, et cetera. You shouldn't go through this alone, Tony, is my point. You should, remember I said that you shouldn't burn your bridges behind you. Well, this is a case where you hopefully haven't burnt them behind you. Can I go back and pick up maybe where I was, or with what I was trying to do, or in some other pivot, as you have told me? Okay. And the response is, remember, you shouldn't just not burn the bridges, but when you go back, you should take your friends and your affiliates with you across the bridge. So don't burn your bridges. So I think those were the important things that got me by. The second was a thing called survival. If you don't have a plan B, you're in trouble. You don't want to start over. You want to build on. That's why we wrote the book. The harder I fail, the higher I bounce. Why? Because I learned from those failures, and maybe I had picked up, what do they call it now, side job. So it's critical to have a plan B for your own and your family, probably survivability. I think you can do that.
Yes, I think most of us, we hear nothing lasts forever, and it is so, so true. When you're in it, and you're riding that high, you the last thing in your world, the last thing in your mind is the thought of if it goes away suddenly. Yet it happens. And this is why you hear of you just mentioned Wayne Newton for some of the audience, if you don't know. He's big from my day. He was big superstar in music. I mean, just huge. Yet here he is investing in something else because you're not necessarily going to sing forever and have hits forever and make it. And you hear of entertainers, sports figures as well. They're
Yeah.
investing in this, they're investing in that. How many years can you play basketball, baseball, football? I mean, you and the smarter ones, and I don't mean to make it sound so bad, but those that have the plan B and invest in something good can keep on surviving. And I think that's the really key thing. So if you're out, especially our audience, if you're out there and you're riding that gravy train as it's called, it just doesn't last forever. And I hate to be the harbinger of bad news on this, but it just seems to happen. And those of us that have that plan B, we make it though in something totally different. I mean, I would have never thought of podcasting. It wasn't even available when I was doing marketing back then. But you just kind of you have to run when you see an opportunity. I think that's the key thing.
And you don't have to go very far and look very deeply to find people who the career is going to end in one way or another. And you mentioned athletes, they're all going to get hurt. They may get hurt right after they've signed a contract. What's their plan B? And we hear the unfortunate stories, not just of athletes, but people who failure has hit them for one reason or another, injury as an example, and they're not prepared for it. They're just not prepared for it. And so you're not all going to become NBC sportscasters. Right? You may end up doing something like coaching a high school basketball team, football team. You need to plan. You need to assume that it's going to end. It will. And hopefully you will have learned from whatever it was you were doing when you failed, not always because it's your fault. It ain't always your fault. Sometimes it is, and that's when you're supposed to have learned.
Great lesson, a lot to ponder about and think about. Max, I want to thank you so much for hopping on and going
When
over
the
this with us. I appreciate it.
listen, when the going gets tough, the tough better get going.
I like that. That's I like that better than the original. You better get going. Max, thank you so much. I appreciate the lessons. Thank you so much, sir. And to our audience, what's your plan B story? We'd love to hear it. Tell us in the comments below. And if you like this podcast, please give us a big thumbs up, subscribe down below, and we'll see you on the next episode.